All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now that Greg is here, we can get started.
Hey, Greg.
And Sarah Sinclair.
Hey, Sarah.
Got a nice group here. This is great. Well, I want to welcome everyone from the studio. And we didn't do a live event, I think, last week because we're slowing down a little bit in the summer. But, you know, there's tons of recordings out there, more than 50. And we're back live this week with my friend and colleague, Mary Lou Panzano. Cindy and I have worked with Mary Lou for years at Bayer. We've done everything from a complete audit with her to lots of trainings to project work to all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot from her in my career, and watching her run her team at Bayer, they would run through a brick wall for her. And great manager, great communicator, great strategic thinker, great tactician. I mean, she's got it all. And she just wrote a book, which I love the title, Cementing Change, Cracking the Code for Communications at Work.
There you go.
And
Yep.
I got my own hardcover copy. Mine is autographed, so don't
So nice.
be so jealous. But it's autographed by Mary Lou. It's probably going to be worth something someday. Hi, Billy Bailey.
I hope so.
So we're going to dive in. I read the book. It's awesome. There's a lot of change communication books out there. I don't think any of them connect with the real world. I mean, Mary Lou ran the merger with Monsanto and Bayer. You want to talk about major change and cultures colliding? I mean, she's done a lot of major change initiatives. So I loved about the book is that it's so grounded in the real world, grounded in her experience. It's not a lot of theory. It's just a lot of great advice. And my first question, Mary Lou, do you want to say hi to the group, Mary Lou?
Yeah, sure. So hello, everybody in the studio. I just want to thank Cindy and Steve and Zach as well for inviting me to be not only here today, but to be part of the advisory board, because I've been watching this studio grow since before it started. And I'm just amazed with what you have been doing and what you've been teaching and how people have been engaging with each other. So thank you, everyone in the studio, for being here. And thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Awesome. So I don't know if I want to say you spent 40 years helping organizations change. I don't want to out you because, you know, it makes you seem old, but you're not. But you spent a lot of years helping organizations change. What is the biggest myth that leaders still believe about change? I mean, I know I've worked with leaders and I know that their thinking is not always right about it. What do you think is the biggest myth?
Honestly, I think the biggest myth is that leaders think that employees are going to figure it out. They're going to move on, they're going to get over it, and they're going to do it quickly, and they're going to do it exactly the way they would like them to do it. And all of that is just not true because, number one, there's not only one change going on in an organization. As we know today, there's as many as 6 or 8 to 10 happening at the same time for people. So the capacity for change just isn't there the way I think leaders sometimes think that it is. And yes, we can adapt to the next iteration of our, iOS update on our iPhones pretty quickly, but that's, one change. And you think of all the things that are changing in our lives, 6, 7, 8, 9 changes layered on top of one another. It's very hard to grasp what all that's about. So I think it's a real missed opportunity for leaders to think that employees are just going to grab on and they're resilient and they'll figure it out and they'll move on and they'll make it happen. They need help. They need support getting through all that. And I think that's a big myth that leaders think employees can just figure it out and move on.
I love it. And by the way, I have enough questions for Mary Lou. Keep her here for 5 hours. So would love to hear from the group as well in the chat. Throw them in the chat. Anything that you're experiencing now that you might want advice on, some change that you're trying to work through, she may be able to help. But anything like that, put in the chat. And to sort of transition to what you just said, I think everyone treats change as like a one-off initiative, right? We're going to go through the change and then everything's going to be fine. And you just said that's not often the case with employees. And that's why you call the book Cementing Change. Everyone talks about managing a change. No one talks about sustaining it, making sure that the change is cemented, locked in.
Yeah.
Why is the cementing part so much harder than launching a change initiative?
Well, I love this question because I think that sometimes we feel like change is like a rocket, right? We put all the fuel into the launch and the launch goes up, the rocket goes up, hopefully everything goes okay. But to complete the mission, the crew has to figure out a lot of stuff along the way. There's going to be problems. Things are not going to work the way they're supposed to work. There could be any kind of an issue. And the launch is where a lot of times all the energy goes in and everybody collapses in mission control and they're all excited. But that's just the beginning. All the hard work starts while you're in the rocket. In the book, I use the example of Apollo 13 as, this idea of how to work through the challenges that are going to inevitably face you in every single change you're trying to make. And then multiply that by 5 or 6 or 7 rockets. And they're all launching at different times. And you've got the same crew trying to fly them, right? And mission control trying to keep track of everything. We can call that the change management team, if you will. But I think that's the problem, is that the communication starts the change process. It starts, here's what we're doing. Here's, hopefully it says, here's why we're doing it. Here's what's going to change for you. Here's what's not going to change for you, hopefully, right? And here's the vision. And then all along that journey, once you get off the launching pad, the world happens, life evolves. And so the cementing part isn't the change necessarily, the process of the change, because we're always constantly evolving through change, but it's like the approach to help make it stick. That's the part, that's the cement. Like, how do you foundationally make the change work? And there's a lot of elements to that.
That's awesome.
For sure.
Yeah.
We've got a couple questions coming in.
Go ahead. I can see them, so go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Daniel is asking a great question. You mentioned Mary Lou. He's asking, do leaders think employees can figure out the change, or do they not see the value of explaining change? What's been your experience with that? How much do you have to coach leaders? Do you have to coach leaders? What's your experience with them seeing the value in communicating change?
Yeah, it really depends on the leader. And I know that may sound like a really wonky answer, but there are some leaders who really value the role that communications plays in helping helping employees along the change journey. And those are the ones that are going to give you the time. Those are the ones going to listen to what's happening on the ground, because your communicators, you've got 2 ears going, one mouth or one voice channel, and you want to use them right in that proportion. So having your ears to the ground on how's the change landing with employees? What are they worried about? What are they excited about? What do they need help with? What don't they yet understand? And the leaders who listen to that coaching and that counseling and do something about it are the ones that are going to win. The challenge is when you have leaders who feel like, well, I did the town hall. Like, what else do you need me to do?
Right.
You can't just walk off and start thinking about the next change. You've got to stay in the trenches with the team, at least out in front, making sure that people can have access to you in whatever way and whatever channels you use. And that's where the communications counseling has really come into play, because a lot of times the leader thinks the only channel is my town hall meeting, or the only channel is my monthly whatever that I send out. No, there's lots of channels. There's lots of ways to reach employees and to listen to them.
Exactly. I love that. And Julie Bailey, that's a great comment that she put in the chat here. To that point, she's found that by the time a leader is ready to launch, they've spent so much of time already managing themselves through that change. They don't see that others need time to do the same exact thing. It's really tough. And go ahead.
Yes, I mean, they've been thinking about that change likely for months and months, and have had lots of people inputting and helping them decide, actually make the decision. And all of the things I'm talking about is once the decision is made. We're not even talking about what it takes to get to the decition. And the missing, and I know we were just talking with, I forget her first name, was it Melissa Miller at the beginning of the call? Yeah, around the role that the middle management plays in this process, right? Because a lot of times, and it depends on the change, I get it, like, sometimes there's a market moving decision that's made, and there's this rapid flow of fuel that goes into that rocket that everybody's got to get all the information at the same time. There are some directional things you can share with middle managers to get their heads wrapped around. There's something coming. Here's what we're going to be thinking about. Here's what we're going to be doing. And here's, how we're going to move forward. You may not have the exact decision yet, but the more you can involve them and prep them to be the ones that they're the ones that employees are going to go to ask all the questions. And if they don't know anything more than everybody else, they're going to be unprepared, and they're going to feel like they can't do anything to support their teams through the change either.
Yeah.
So true. So true.
So when I was reading the book, Mary Lou, I kept coming back to the same thing. When change goes bad, or it doesn't go as fast or as complete as, when it doesn't work as well as everyone thought it should have, is it a change problem or is it a trust problem? It seems to me that if like leaders who launch and then run are going to lose a lot of trust. They're going to, leaders that don't have trust to begin with, the change isn't going to work because people don't trust their leaders.
Right.
How much trust come into play?
I think trust is a huge element. And I think it's probably the one thing that leaders have more control over than they think they do when it comes to change, because people will follow great leaders that they trust. You said, my team would run through a wall for me. People will go into the abyss with a leader as long as they can trust them. That if they know that the change is going to be okay because the leader's been involved in it and they trust that person's decision making, they trust the person's, authenticity, they trust their capability, they trust who they are as a human being, right? So all of those things, if you feel like the company and you have your leader's best interests in mind, then they're going to follow you and they're not going to be as resistant, right? But when that isn't the case, then I think that, if I don't buy anything from people that I don't trust or from companies that I don't trust. Why would I trust you in a change program when you haven't built that with me yet? And I think that's something that they lose sight of, that I don't think change is the problem. I definitely think trust is the problem. And Daniel was at the IABC conference. This notion of trust, leadership trust, and the erosion of trust was a huge theme coming through the conference and a lot of the things that we talked about.
Yeah.
So, I love how when you talk about leadership and you talk about they need to have empathy and caring and vulnerability and they need to listen. 25 years ago, those were soft skills for leaders. But I think we're hearing more and more and more that the employees want that humanity and the vulnerability and the transparency way more than, Jack Welch, who's going to, walk in and dominate a boardroom and, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. And things are so different today than they were 25 years ago, Steve. I think from one of the first things that comes to mind is that employees are expecting to be involved in their work. They are not expecting to just work for a paycheck. 25 years ago, you started at 9 o'clock, you ended at 5 o'clock. It was a command and control. You didn't have a lot of voice in decisions that were made or even how things got done. And that was the expectation. That is not the case anymore. People want to have a say in what happens at work, what happens in their job. And they want to understand why things are happening the way they're happening. And listening isn't really table stakes anymore. It's not really a courtesy. It's a way of staying engaged with your employees to understand what's going on. What are they feeling? Like there was another session at the IABC conference about emotions. When's the last time you're talking about emotion and feeling in the workplace? Well, the truth is that people don't leave their hearts and their feelings at home when they turn on their laptop or when they show up in an office or in a manufacturing plant. They bring their whole self to work. Before, that just didn't matter as much. 25 years ago, you didn't even talk about this.
Right.
This wasn't even something that we even talked about. So those skills, I think, are just more valuable now than ever. And then, my experience in working in companies for over 30 years in employee communications, 3 large global companies, is that, there were always changes going on, but there was like 1 or 2 major things happening. That's just not the case anymore. There's just that everything is changing for everybody all at once. And we're all supposed to be okay with figuring out how to make all of that work. That's not the case anymore. And now, you don't even have people only working in an office or in a manufacturing setting. You've got people working all over the world, all times of day and night, from all different kinds of, hybrid models or whatever it is, and in very different kinds of work designs too. More open, more collaborative, all of that. You can't be isolated and siloed anymore. It just doesn't work. And that's not what people expect in the workplace anymore. We talked about this notion of trust. I think that's another issue, is that before you just believed that whatever the CEO said or whatever the decision was, that was the decision and it was always the right thing. Trust is more now a competitive advantage because it had eroded so much. So that has changed a lot too. And that is, employees want to be more aligned with what's happening in the organization, with the company's values, with the company's purpose. Before, it really wasn't like that. It was more like, where can I get a job? Where can I get stable benefits? How are they going to protect me for the rest of my career? That doesn't happen anymore either.
Nope,
right?
nope.
The employee contract is completely different. So I think, all of these things, and then the technology that we've got today is just blown away in terms of how people operate anymore. And the more technical it comes, the more humanity is necessary because there's so much more missing. So I think there's lots of reasons for all of that, but the leaders who are helping employees navigate through the change in a way that shows more empathy and has more listening, and not just listening, but listening without judgment, listening to understand. I call it listening in neutral in the book, which is not my phrase. Jill Vitiello coined that for me, but it's listening to really just let me understand your point of view. And that's different too. I don't think that was the case as much 25 years ago. So I think there's a lot of things going on there, but if you want to deliver results, you gotta have more human connection with your people.
You think that's a big problem? Like a lot of leaders I know, they say they're listening, but they're already locked in. They're not listening. Listening in neutral. They're not. They're listening, but they're not. I don't know, processing or what do they? A lot of leaders say that they're listening, but they're not. What are they doing wrong?
Well, I think what they're doing wrong is that there's two parts of that. I think one is that they're hearing maybe and not listening, because there's a difference there. And I think even the way they're listening is that they're maybe listening to either validate or to just say they are. But if you listen and don't do anything with what you hear, you might as well just shut the doors and not listen at all, because people want to feel like they've been heard. You may not take their decision. You may not necessarily be able to do what they're asking you to do or what they're suggesting needs to be changed in the organization, or we want to make a change. Here's an approach we could use that I think would work better. Okay, thank you for your input. We're unable to do that for these reasons, but we really appreciate that you bring this up, because potentially that could feed some other thing that happens. That's listening more in neutral and listening in a way that people feel heard. And you're demonstrating that you heard them. If you're just going to go around and talk to people and then just do la 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 and forget anything you heard and don't do anything about it, and if you can't do something about it and don't say that you can't and explain why, then people are going to shut down. They're going to say you're not listening. I'm tired of giving you feedback because you're not doing anything with it, or I'm tired of sharing my insights because you just ignore them all the time, and you don't even. My insights, my input, my feedback goes into a black hole. I never hear anything about what happens to it. So I think there's a pretend version of listening that comes down to action.
Yeah, I use that on Cindy all the time. That pretend version of listening.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it.
Critical to our relationship, really.
Well, Greg put a question in the chat that's kind of related to what we're talking about right now. He says social proof is a big part of change adoption, seeing people actually do things. What are some ways you've helped large, diverse workforce see that, quote unquote, people like me are adapting to the desired new behavior? Are there things that you try to help not only leaders, but, again, just your whole background, the diverse workforces that you have worked with, how do you start that going with that social proof?
I love the question, because it's the show me kind of thing, right? You say that things are moving along, but I can't really see that. This may sound like a, communication stroking suggestion, but storytelling. The proof is in the story. So when you're talking when you're going through a change and you see people adopting the behavior that's needed for the change, you see people, adapting the technology that's needed or whatever the change is, tell those stories. What was the before? What was the change journey like? What's the after? What does it feel like? Are we living the vision, or are we achieving the goal? And so I think when you can do that, then others see, number one, they can believe it's possible. Number two, they believe it's possible for me. And number three, they can see what the benefit is on the other side of it. And I'm not here to tell you that all kinds of change is good, because some people's change, when they find out that the change is happening to them, they lost their job, or a very good friend of theirs or a family member lost their job. So that doesn't feel as good. And so I understand that that's happening a lot more than we've ever seen, I think, in a long time. So how you help people transition out of the organization matters too, because one misstep could cause a social proof story that you don't want to see.
Yeah.
For
It could
sure.
be reputation damaging. It could take you months, if not years, to overcome. So how you treat people, even when the decision is a negative one for them, it really matters. And I think those are the stories that people tell. You know, I've had to do things that leaders hate to do. At least this leader hates to do, which is tell high performing people that I picked to be on my team that their jobs are being eliminated. It's the god awful worst thing to do. And I wrote the scripts that I was going to have to read, and that the other leaders, you know, downsizing their teams were going to have to read over a period of a day or two or whatever it was. And there's a difference between reading the script with the HR person in the room and then reaching across the table and putting your hand on somebody's arm and saying, I'm really sorry that this decision is impacting you the way it is. I'm going to do everything I can to help you through this change. This is a difficult transition. I'm here for you.
Yep.
That's not in the script because the lawyers probably won't approve it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't that. Yeah.
But that's what a manager says to an employee that has been a highly valued member of the team for years, right? And who has no performance issues and has no reason to be fired other than, or job eliminated, other than budget cuts, staff reductions, restructurings, you name it.
Sure.
That's the difference between what the storytelling can do for you. Because someone can say, I hated the decision, but my manager really helped me move on.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, so true.
Mary Lou, that leads me into the 4 C's, your concept of the 4 C's, which, you know, the book is, I don't know if I can say it's based on it, but it's a big part of the book.
Yeah.
And it's clarity, connection, caring, and courage. Now, we just talked about caring and how important that is. I think that was an example of that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about clarity, connection, and really courage. I'd like to hear the most about courage because I do believe it takes a lot of courage to do change properly. Courage to say what it is, even though it's bad. The courage to stick with it. But talk about the 4 C's and why each one of them is important. Because I love that concept.
Yeah. So if I could tell just a quick story about where the 4 C's came from, I think this group would appreciate it. Just to ground, like, how did I even come up with this?
Yeah.
I was presenting. Our team had just won some pretty prestigious awards for a communication program that we ran when Bayer consolidated its offices into Whippany. So we were not only consolidating 5 offices into one new space, but we were happily giving everyone a workstation in lieu of a private office, which they used to have before, at least most people did. So huge change on both sides of that, culture shift as well as a physical move. And we won some pretty good awards. When we won the Employee Communications Program of the Year award by Reagan Communications, I started getting invited to come speak about what did we do and how did we do it. And my first event was the IABC World Conference in Chicago. I think it was in 2014. And I did a breakout session on this. And it was about a month before. And I was like, I got to get my, together because I don't know how I'm going to present a 3-year change program in 40 minutes, including Q&A with like 200 communications professionals in the room. So I started writing down all the things that we did. One Sunday, I just did a brain dump on yellow legal pad. And I went for a long walk and I came back and I started circling in color pencils, like common themes. And that's where the 4 C's came from.
Oh, I knew that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So the first is clarity, and clarity, it all starts with clarity, and clarity is like knowing and sticking to the goal. And that sounds like it's a really easy thing to do. But I think as communicators, we know one of the hardest things to do is to distill down what are we doing, why are we doing it, why it matters, and all of that into a clean, crisp, clear message platform that we can anchor all of our communications to. And then the sticking to the goal piece around that is, I don't know how many of you have sat in change management team meetings where everybody wants to tell you how to do your job. And they want to tell you what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And that this great idea to bring all employees into the parking lot and create I don't know what is a brilliant idea. It's like, hold on a minute. Let's remember what we're trying to do here. Let's anchor back to what the goal is. And so in the clarity piece, we had to do that so many times because there were so many people involved in that particular project. So that's the clarity piece. The connection piece, we started talking about this, is engaging and involving others in your decision. And that's your naysayers, your fence sitters, and your supporters across the board. Because I think one of the things that, the naysayers will be like, heck no, hell no, I won't go. I'm just not going to go. It's like, okay, that's one approach. How about we invite you to be part of the, the XYZ committee or team who's putting together the video on the amenities in the new space. I don't know, pick something. But the more you can bring your naysayers and your fence sitters under the hood to see a little bit more about how the sausage is made, now you've got them involved and you've got them engaged, and now you've got their input and their feedback. And that's really what they want. They want to be part of the solution if they can be part of the solution.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. I never keep your friends close and your enemies closer, right?
Yeah, and you know, one of the craziest ideas we had, and it came up because I was having a conversation with somebody in line at the cafeteria who didn't even work in that office, was visiting from somewhere else. She was talking about the fact that a colleague had told her that they were concerned about not having enough space in the workstations. Now I'm going to be giving up an office. How's this going to work? And she said she'd love to, you know, it would be great if she could just see what the new workstation looks like to see how much stuff she could bring. And I was like, well, why don't we see if we can get the furniture companies to put the new workstations in the old space so people could see them and like kick the tires. Yeah. Crazy idea. That's where the courage comes in. Sometimes you gotta fight for ideas. But that's what we did. We did a workstation tour. It was the most brilliant thing we did. It was actually a pivotal point in this particular change project because as communications people and change management team members, we sat in those workstations during lunch for 2 weeks in each of the old sites in a space that they made open for us. And we showed them what it was going to be like to work in open space. And we answered every single question that we could.
Wow.
We got so much feedback. We were able to debunk myths that like, that's not really happening. Where did you hear that? And so it was such a great engagement and got people involved. And we did a videotape too, because some people complain that I'm not in the office those 2 weeks. Somebody's going to complain about something, but we did a great video with a couple of employees and we had a great time with it. But it was a pivotal move in the change because we were on the ground listening, taking notes, answering questions, and being there for employees. So that's all part of the engagement. And that also bleeds into caring a little bit, which is the third C. And the caring is really just caring about the impact that the change is going to have on other people. And, you know, this model applies in your personal life for change as well. And if you talk about that, like it just applies across any kind of change that you're trying to make or that a business is trying to make. But the caring piece also means taking care of yourself. Yeah. Because you need to have the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual stamina to push through the change, whether you're leading it for yourself or you're leading it for your team. And then the last one is courage.
That's the one that
so courage. It's really interesting because as I was looking at the list of things, there were a number of times where the communications team took up the flag for our employees on something that we kept hearing, like this workstation tour, for example. We spent time and money trying to figure out how to make that thing happen, but we fought for it. We fought for standing desks because we're a healthcare company and people sitting as the new smoking. That's what we were hearing back in 2011 and 2012 when we were doing this project. Sometimes you have to be the rock in the road and say, no, like, we're just not going to do that way. And here's the reasons, here's the potential implications. So you've got to sometimes fight for budget. You got to sometimes fight to get data. I say fight, meaning make the business case, right? For it. But but you can sit back and just let it all happen, or you can stand up and step forward and step out of your comfort zone sometimes and do the things that you wouldn't necessarily do. I'll share another quick story. It was toward the end of that project. The change management team was selecting the signage for the building, not on the building, but outside the roadway signage in front of the building. And the decision that the change management team shared with the steering committee that they wanted to go after was, and I was the one who was going to have to make the call to the global branding team to get the exception, because of course we were not going to install the sign the way it looks like in Berlin or wherever. So what they decided as to move forward with was a round. The Bear logo is round, has a cross in the center. It was color coded, and they wanted to have a lighted sign, 8 foot high, rotating, illuminated sign. So the first thing I thought of was that's going to look really pretty from the street. But what happens when they change the logo?
Yeah, which they will.
They had already done once since the time that I had been there. And I was only there at that point for about 4 or 5 years. And so the other option was to do the same exact design, except in stainless steel and not rotating. they were both going to cost like $200,000 or $250,000.
Wow.
So I went to the president of the business and I said, Phil, this is what they want to do. The team has agreed. This is what they want me to get the exception for. I think I should get the exception for both of them, because I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in a lighted sign whose logo is going to change in a couple of years. So he said, do that. Now, of course, the head of the steering committee was really mad at me for going over his head, but I'm like, I'm going to be on the hook for a $250,000 decision that we're going to have to change in a couple of years. I'm not doing that. And the logo did change 3 years later.
It did.
Wow.
So sometimes you just got to go in and fight the fight and do what you have to do. But that's just one example of the many things that we had to advocate for, or just change the decision.
I love that last.
Change the decision.
I love that last story, Mary Lou, about going over somebody's head or going around somebody. I know for a fact, because I worked with you at Bayer, that you were well respected. You had leadership here a lot of the time, if not most of the time, not all the time. What do you say to communicators, probably on this call, and others who don't have that access, who have the ideas that you had, or who can't talk leaders out of doing something bad or wrong? I mean, I know there's a lot of people in our field that do not have access, and it's tragic in a way, because they have really good ideas and they could do a lot of good.
Yeah, I think part of it is really just building those relationships. I know that sounds like sort of of course, table stakes kind of answer, but sometimes you can work with the people that do have your trust and help them influence others also. So I didn't have great relationships with all of these leaders when I first started there. But over time, part of it is the credibility that you bring to the table every time you have a conversation with them or that they're in. And others is use your allies. Who do you know who knows those people that you're trying to influence, and how can you get some exposure to them? It may not be a one-on-one exposure, but is it a project? Is it something that you did? Is it a story that you can tell about, when you did block a decision and it was a good move? I think all of those things sort of build your credibility over time, but you do need to try to figure out who you can find if you don't have the access and the direct influence. Get to know the executive assistants, if there still are any out there, and get to know who they are, and see who that knows them, or other people that you're trying to build some rapport with.
So I think, one way that Crescenzo Communications has won respect from leaders at different consulting opportunities is if you help them not make a mistake, or help them recover from a mistake they made. What is one common mistake, like during a change initiative, that leaders, it sounds reassuring to them, it sounds like a good move, and it usually lands wrong with employees? Can you think of any stories about that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is don't use the words, I know change is hard, but. Nobody ever wants to hear that, because it's like, oh my God, they're rolling their eyes even before you finish anything.
And yet every leader says that. Every leader says that. That's always the first thing out of their mouth.
It's the first, I know change is hard, but just acknowledge this is going to be challenging. This is going to take you learning new things, to speak their language, right? Steve, you talk about this all the time. Use your weekend words, get into their heads. But the only way you can do that is if you have people telling you what they're feeling and what they're thinking about, and what employees want to know and want to hear from you as a leader. That is a way that you can counsel leaders on, don't say this, say that. So that's one thing. The other is that we're all in this together. Guess what? We are not in this together. We all work for the same company, yes, but you're way over there, we're way over here, and you're not living the life I'm living right now. Maybe someday you did, right, in the past, but I think you may have forgotten that you have.
Right.
So it's just getting real with people and giving them the opportunity to help them understand that you understand them and where they're at, and meeting them more where they're at. And I think that's where the middle managers come into play in a big way, because that's not only the feedback group that you should be listening to in terms of what is on the minds of employees, but it's also the mechanism to get them to translate what's happening, what it means for their team, and to remember that there's only so many things, control what you can control, focus on what you control. We'll work through this change. And I'll support you through it. People want to know they can be supported through it, because sometimes they don't think they can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I agree. And that brings me back to one thing I wanted to ask you. Like, it goes back to listening a little bit. It goes back to caring a little bit. It goes back to a lot of things you've touched on. But when there is change, there is going to be valuable disagreement from people that are in the trenches that are doing the work, and the change is going to affect the company's ability to meet its goals. And how do you get the what is it, the straw from the chaff or whatever you say? How do you resistance is one thing. People are always resist change, but what about valuable feedback? Is there a way to harvest some of that and use it? Or do you coach leaders to do that, or is that hard to get leaders to do? Because then I don't want to let the inmates run the asylum. We can't be making decisions based on what a machinist says or a pharmacist says or whatever. Is there any way to allow that two-way communication to get the valuable feedback and not just the I'm not doing it?
Yeah, there's the philosophical way about this, and then there's sort of like how do you actually do it? So tactically, what do you do? But I think philosophically, anytime you can ask or you can get input from employees to talk about, what have we considered certain risks? Have we considered certain stakeholders? Is there what scenarios could we come up with that would cause this implementation not to work? Like what monkey wrenches might we encounter? When you're asking questions like, what option might work better? Because a lot of times leaders know what they want to do in terms of the change. And then they work with you to communicate it. But they haven't quite figured out what the full path will be, right? It's just like launching the rocket. It's like, well, we launched the rocket. Now the path is up to you guys in the crew. So I think that, if leaders can find a way to get employees to feel safe asking those questions, the psychological safety comes into play here without, saying we hate the change. It's like, let's make the change work the best way we can. And the employees are usually the ones who are closer to the work.
Right.
Than the leaders are. So it's like, we know what's working. We know what doesn't work. We know what customers and clients are saying. We know what the pain points are. We live them every day. If this change can alleviate some of that, maybe we can have the conversation a little bit differently. And I think communicators are particularly uniquely qualified to have their view of across the organization and have their tentacles out there and have their ears open in a lot more places and with a lot more influence than I think sometimes they give themselves even credit for, because they're the arms and legs from the employee base to the management. And I think that's just a missed opportunity if you're not finding ways to invite employees into that process and to have them ask those questions and poke the holes and come up with maybe a different approach that you hadn't thought about in terms of implementing the change.
Right. Now I know this isn't you, Mary Lou, because I've worked with you. But I have worked with other clients where they were so infatuated with being part of the leadership team that was in the know, the inner circle. They forgot they were supposed to kind of be the eyes and ears for employees as well, and they lost that perspective. Were you ever tempted? Do you ever get kind of swept up into the power vortex, and you're one of the people in the room that know what's happening, and and lose that compassion or that caring with employees about what they're about to go through?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever lost that. I've seen other leaders forget that sometimes, because communicators, we're in that unique position where we're going to ask the question that no one else is asking. Mm-hmm. We're going to poke the hole that no one else has the courage to poke.
Yep.
We're going to bring a perspective that somebody else isn't thinking about. And that's valuable. That could make or break how a change initiative goes. So for me, sometimes having the courage to say, but wait a minute, are we thinking about this? Or what about that? And so sometimes even the question about, we're talking about all this help we're going to give the 60 employees that we're letting go tomorrow. What about the survivors?
Yeah.
Is anybody thinking about their survivors and how we're going to transition the work or stop doing the work or outsource, like all of the stuff that goes along with it. So sometimes just being I think leaders like to hear the words, this could risk the success of your event or your program. When they hear about risks and potential failures that you can help them avoid, they're going to perk up.
I love that. Yeah. Risk is a powerful word for them, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Especially when you think about all the time and money and effort that they're putting into the change to have it fail.
Yeah, right.
So true.
Yeah.
It's a career defining moment for them, and you can help them.
Yeah.
So, you've seen, obviously, you've managed a lot of successful transformations and change, and I'm sure you've been part of some that failed or didn't work as well. What's the earliest warning sign that you think a change effort's headed for trouble? I mean, I've been part of it,
Yeah.
and I have a couple ideas, but I'd love to hear your experiences.
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is when you ask 7 leaders what the goal of the change is, and you get 7. So the alignment is
That's
like
called a
one of
clue,
the
isn't it?
first ones, like they're just singing from a different hymn book. And I'll go back to this Whippany example for a minute, because like I said, this was 3 years of my life I'll never get back. But as we were starting down the track for this project, not me, but my boss was invited to participate in a visioning exercise with the real estate company and the interior designers. And what are we doing with this space? What do we want to say? What kind of company do we want it to represent? Blah, blah, blah. So they did this like half-day exercise. And I asked my boss, well, what did you come up with? Like, what's the output? She goes, well, we really didn't agree on a lot of stuff. I'm like, Meredith, what are you saying? So she said, well, we had a lot of ideas, but I'm not really sure we agreed on anything. And I said, well, who's bringing it all together? And she said, I don't know, go talk to the interior designers. They were running this session. It was Gensler. So I called Gensler and I was like, can you tell me what they talked about? They said, well, we have notes and we have little stickies and all. I'm like, can you give it to me? Because I'm the one who's on the hook for creating the message platform that we're anchoring this entire project to. And I don't know what the message is. Like, I don't know what I wasn't there.
Right.
I don't know what they talked about. So I went through this big like download of all this stuff. And I came up with 5 key what I thought were the 5 goals of this particular change project. And I wrote them down on a piece of paper and I threw them on a slide and I presented them to the steering committee and they're like, oh, this is really good. It never changed. They didn't change a word. But what they did do was agree that this was the message platform and we're going to stick to this. And everything we did anchored to one or more of those 5 things that were related to why we were doing what we were doing, what it was going to mean for the business, and how it was going to improve lives for our employees. There were 5 that came off the page, but I insisted. I think this is the communications leadership message here. I insisted on figuring out if I couldn't get it from the 7 different people and hear the same message, I'm going to create something that sounds like it will align them and then throw it up the flagpole and see who salutes, because you don't have a choice at that point, because then what happens is you have 7 different leaders sharing 7 different messages with all of their different teams. And employees are going, well, I heard this and I heard that. And now you've got a bigger mess to fix.
That is crucial, critical advice that I don't know that I've ever heard of a communicator stepping in with 7 leaders and saying, hey, 7 dwarfs, you're all saying different things here. And I think this is what you're saying. And all 7 leaders adhere to it.
Yeah. And I mean that we never changed that. Here's what it was like the first slide we did in every single update we did for everything, and everything we did in terms of the communications approach and all of the activities we did for employees to bring them along on the journey, all married up to at least 1 or more of those. I think another one, and we talked a little bit about it, is not investing enough time in prepping your middle management for what's going on with the change. I think that that's a big mistake. And I think that it gets glossed over. And I think that a lot of people think if you give them, 50 slides and a message document and a Q&A, they're going to figure it all out and move it forward. And that's, I think, a big mistake. The other, I think, is also underestimating the time and energy and effort that it takes the organization to actually move through the change process.
Oh.
The whole capacity for change and the organization's change fatigue. I actually heard a new word at the conference that Jennifer Balkan, I believe her name is, mentioned. And she talked about change fatigue, which is really she described it as sort of a temporary state, and it is recoverable rather quickly. But she described it something called change trauma.
Oh.
And change trauma is really more, longer lasting, and like, I think she called it like value. like it gets to the core of your values. Like they don't care about me here anymore. Look at what they're putting me through. And it's more like a PSTD kind of situation. And if you think about the kinds of change and the rapid change and the acceleration of what we're doing for employees and what we're doing, I guess, to employees, it's a lot. It's a lot. And that's why the burnout, the mental health issues have become more important in the workplace to help employees deal with it, because they're putting them in a change trauma state, and they can't function properly when they're in that kind of state of mind. So that was kind of new news for me, but I think that's another piece of the puzzle that gets missed, that you're overtaxing. You're just overtaxing your people. And maybe it is necessary, but I would question that.
Yeah, me too. I would too. Is there any questions in the chat, Sin, or?
Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, Greg asked a really good question. He says, change is often going from state A to state B, but with AI, there seems to be an opportunity to go from state A to some not really defined yet future state. So how do you characterize AI change projects that you've been involved in or that you've learned about?
Great question, Greg.
I love the question, Greg. I have personally not been involved at any business level with AI in the workplace changes. I just have not personally done that. I've been changing myself and how I operate my business with AI. But what I'm hearing from people is that the biggest misnomer is that the AI technology that is out there that can help you move through change in maybe some different ways does not negate the necessity for the human intelligence that has to get interjected into every piece of the puzzle as you're going through your change process and your change journey. The word HI came out, or the letters HI, that human intelligence piece cannot get discounted in the technology and in what we're using with AI. There are plenty of things that AI can do for us and help us do more efficiently and more effectively. We still need the critical thinking. We still need the human beings. And until machines run the world, which maybe we will see in our lifetimes, I don't know, human beings still lead companies. Human beings are still handling the communications for most of this work. So I haven't seen any of that directly myself, Greg, but I love the question. I think it's something we really need to pay attention to and to influence.
Yeah, I love the question too, Greg, because a lot of companies are asking their employees to change to get ready for AI or to adapt to AI, but they don't really know what that means. They just know that something's coming down the pipe and they got to deal with it.
Yeah, and those guidelines and the do's and the don'ts and the watch outs and the there's the proprietary tools, then there's the open tools. I mean, there's just a world out there, and every time you think you know what it is, there's something new, there's something different, or there's the next version of something already out there. So it's astounding. It's just astounding.
And for the communications industry, what we're seeing, Zach and Cindy and I, in our client work, is there's two tiers or castes, even two levels of being created, where these communicators get Copilot Enterprise, which is phenomenal, and these communicators don't. And people are fighting over that, and the people that have it are going to far outpace the people that don't. And that's going to be a real issue, I think. It's like half my team has Copilot. We worked with people where 3 of the people had Copilot Enterprise and the other ones didn't. And they couldn't get IT to give them the ticket, Willy Wonka's golden ticket. And the other people are creating agents, and they're using it every single day, saving hours a day, and the other people are without it. And I think that's going to be a big issue.
That is a big issue. There's no question that is, because it's the haves and the have-nots, and there's a huge fairness issue there. There's probably some employment lawyers too who could get in on the mix on that one.
You know what? You're probably right. That's really not fair. Now, I know we don't have time to get in. We could do a probably workshop on this, but I love that you said one of the biggest mistakes was, or when you see things are going to go off the rails, it's because middle managers have not been brought in yet, or have not been properly informed and are armed or connected.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you did it right. When is the right time to reach out to middle managers, and when they're not allowed to know everything, but when's the right time to get them involved, and what do you give them to start? Like just how do you get middle managers involved as early as possible when you know that you can't get them involved in everything right away?
Yeah, I think a lot of that goes down to sort of the vision for the organization, the directional vision for the organization, and that has to be clear from the top. Like, this is the direction we're taking the organization. How we get there, we have some things to figure out yet. But one of the challenges that we had, and that your research that you did with us helped us understand, was that there was a pretty big disconnect between what the top leaders knew and were like getting wrapped around for change, and what the next couple of levels knew. And so we knew that we needed to do something to not only simplify the noise coming into our managers, but we also needed to synthesize it for them and help make it easy to understand what they had to know, what they had to do, and what they had to, share, or whatever the three things were that we were working on with them. But those channels were not in place, at least not a singular set of channels. Let's put it that way. They were getting arrows darted at them from all over the place. Yeah. So our influence there was to say, let's hold on a second. Let's create a couple of things for just managers. So we created a leader must-haves. This is what our leaders must know. And it was all anchored to, here's who we are, here's why we are, here's what we do, here's why it matters, and here's where we're going. That foundational stuff didn't change. The pieces in the middle were, now that you know that, managers, here's a change initiative we're starting, or here's something else that we're working on that we need you to pull through for your employees. And then, so there was that one sort of channel out to our employee leaders. And the second one was the leader briefings, we called them. And this is what we were doing during the Panzano acquisition, where we said there were so many myths out here, and so much misinformation about what's happening. Let's get these couple of hundred leaders on the phone. We decided we would do it once a month. During the pandemic, it became essential. We wound up doing them like once a week sometimes, because things were changing so much. But we set up a platform where for 30 minutes, we're going to hit a topic. And most of the time we were dispelling myths. Let's tell you what's really happening. There's a lot of rumors out there about what's going on. Let's tell you what's really happening. And some of that information was, we were in the beginning of the transaction with Monsanto and the acquisition and whatever other change your company's going through. And other times you're already in the midst of it. And sometimes you're at the end of it and you're just trying to clean up the mess. But for us, these were things that didn't exist before in a centralized way. And it was a huge change for our managers. But the first was gathering the data, because we had to sell the idea senior leadership that this was a miss, and that we had a missed opportunity here, and we have some risk again in the organization. Here's how we can simplify it. And we just need your buy-in, because now we're going to change how we handle all of our content production work too.
So
now, HR isn't allowed to send something to managers every 49 minutes. Like, they're going to have to consolidate and come to us and work with us, and we'll channel it.
Changing the whole system.
Unless it's an emergency, and most of the time it wasn't.
For sure. Yeah.
And leaders don't do that without data, right, Mary Lou? That's why we get hard to do audits all the time, because they don't do it without that data. They just won't make that change.
It's not what I think we should do, because they never listen to what you think you should do. It's what the data tells us we have to do.
Perfect. Right. That's Cindy's favorite saying. That's Cindy's favorite saying. All right, I want to wrap this up so we stay on time, Mary Lou. I cannot thank you enough for your time and for the book. It's really, really worth it. I mean, it's just so not. I love. We didn't get time to do this, but I love how you go back and forth in the book about professional change and personal change. And you think that people who read this book, I mean, I know the answer. It can help with personal change. I mean, you should sell this to non-communicators. I mean, I got great ideas out of this book for my own life.
Yeah, well, I will add. So if you think about the 4 C's as a recipe, I shared with you, we had time to talk about the ingredients, right? The clarity, connection, caring, and courage as the foundation of the recipe. But no recipe is worth its salt unless you have the instructions. And the instructions are what I call 12 prosperity principles that are personal, because all change, regardless of whether you're leading it for an organization or leading it for your communications team or for yourself, starts with you. And so that's where the personal piece comes in, because organizations don't run themselves. People run organizations. And if you're going to implement some change, you start with the people. That's where the coaching work that I do comes in. I've realized that, I don't go into organizations and say, hey, organization, you need my help. I go talk to people who say, I think I could use some help. trying to lead through this change, and whether it's a personal change or a business change. But that's what's covered in the book. So the first half is really the setup around what's going on out there today in the world in terms of change, what leaders need to be thinking about in the 21st century. They're already behind the 8 ball on what this change framework is, why it works, and then how you make it work, which is those 12 prosperity principles. And I just want to also say that Steve and Cindy have contributed to this book in a huge way, because one of the most important things communicators need to do is figure out if what they're doing works. And how do you know that? You do some communications assessment work. So they're one of their protocols for how they do assessments, aka audits, is in the book too. So I appreciate your contribution because it made the book better.
Complete honor.
Our honor and privilege.
Made the book
well,
better.
Mary Lou, you could have enjoyed retirement. I know you're very active. You have a wonderful husband, beautiful home. You're active in the community, you volunteer. So instead of just relaxing and resting on your laurels, you wrote a 300-page book, which is, I mean, that's amazing and it's awesome. So it's a legacy thing, really. When someone closes this book, what's the one idea that you hope sticks with them 5 years from now? Either personal change or corporate change, organizational change.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I really want people to close the book and say, number one, change for myself or my company is possible. And it is not only just possible to navigate through it, but I can prosper through it. Because we can all make our way through change, and we could suffer through it or we could prosper through it. And this anchors you in an approach that's pretty simple to understand, yet not always easy to implement, right? Like any other thing. But if you can get to the clarity, engage and involve other people through connections, care about what you're doing and what the impact is going to have on other people, and have the courage to do something, you're gonna have a better chance of success at this. And those 12 principles are just ways of living that have been very helpful and useful for me. And the other thing I would say is use it, try it, and share it, because it's the kind of approach that really applies across any kind of change you want to make. It works with any kind of change management model. If you're stuck with one that your company uses, or you're using ProSci or anybody else to help you through it, there's a communications element to every change. And this can help you from a comms perspective.
Wow. Really,
Absolutely love it.
If Cindy didn't spend so much money on alcohol and beer products.
Steve, one other thing, and I always forget to mention this. This isn't about making money for me. This is about giving back. So this book, all the proceeds for this book and the other book that I have a chapter in, Cracking the Rich Code, Volume 18, all go to charity. All of the proceeds go to charity.
I didn't even know that, Mary Lou. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. So inspiring on so many levels, Mary Lou. You are such a mentor and a leader in both our professional and personal lives. So really appreciate you taking
what I was saying was, if Cindy didn't spend so much money on wine and hair products, I would hire you as my personal private coach. But I don't have any money.
Make your own money.
I don't have any money.
Make your own money.
Yeah, that's what she says.
So I'm telling you.
Well, Mary Lou, I can't thank you enough. You're such a dear friend and a colleague. And Zach, you want to say what's coming up in the studio before we close out?
Yeah, definitely. And just wanted to say thanks again, Mary Lou. This was incredible.
My honor.
We will not be doing a live event next week because it is heading into the 4th of July weekend. We know a lot of people are busy taking off on vacations and stuff. But we will be back the following week on the 9th to do an event on how to un-AI your corporate writing. I think everyone sees LinkedIn posts or even stuff maybe in your organization where you can just immediately tell that it's AI. So Steve has a presentation put together on how to make sure that your writing sounds human, even if you are using AI. And then we'll be back the following week on the 15th as well. So hope everyone has a great 4th of July weekend. We'll be active out here in the studio next week, but we'll see you live on the 9th.
Yeah, I got a couple of great little case studies I'm going to be posting in the water cooler for next week since we're not going live. And I put a post on LinkedIn today about that AI writing, and we're framing it as robot writing versus human writing, when the real thing is framing it as good writing versus bad writing. And if you train your AI and you can use it properly and it doesn't sound like everybody else, and it's good writing is good writing. I don't care if it's robot working with a smart human or whatever. And so that's what we're going to talk about, is how to use AI without sounding like everybody else. So thank
Yeah,
you, Zach.
that's great. And then I know Daniel had a question in there. I'm going to follow up on that because it was just about some of the statistics around what percentages of change communications and change initiatives fail. So I want to follow up with that and maybe do a post in the water cooler because I know we didn't have time to get to it. And then lastly, wanted to mention the Try This Challenge with the AI agent or the AI agent, the Gemini Gems, or the Copilot. What is it called?
Copilot is agents.
Agent.
No, Copilot is custom GPT. That's what it is. Make sure you give that a try. And if you do give it a try, we're going to buy you a copy of Mary Lou's book. So hopefully you can get that in your hands and give it a read.
Yep. Anyone who does it, we're not going to do a drawing. Anyone who does it gets a copy of the book. So
It's coming your way.
Coming your way. Mary Lou, thank you so much.
You're the best.
Awesome.
Mary Lou.
Thank you.
Thank you to the studio for showing up and your great questions. And we will see you out there.
See you guys.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Appreciate you.